Hello, my name is Pastor Ernesto Lanise. Welcome to Lesson 2 of our study on following Christ in a post-Christian nation. This lesson is entitled A Post-Christian Nation. Now, last week in Lesson 1, we talked about how America was a Christian nation. And we defined our terms. What does it mean when we say America was a Christian nation? It's about America. Not everyone in America was Christian. Not everything America did was Christ honoring. But instead, you had the majority of America's culture from its inception all the way to maybe the 2000s. You had this mainstream cultural consensus that the committed Christians and the cultural Christians and just the guy on Main Street all kind of the same views on the nature of reality, right versus wrong, all that kind of stuff was all kind of the same assumption that was shared by an entire culture. So Christianity was on the inside of this thing. But we are saying that something changed. We are saying that America, which was once a Christian society, is now becoming a post-Christian society. Before we go forward, we're going to go to 1 Chronicles. In 1 Chronicles chapter 12, we have essentially David's being made king. And people are coming to David to pledge their armies, to pledge their allegiance to him. I want you to hear some of the people that come to pledge their allegiance to King David. First Chronicles 12:23. These are the numbers of the divisions of the armed troops who came to David in Hebron to turn the kingdom of Saul over to him according to the word of Yahweh. The men of Judah bearing shield and spear were 6,800 armed troops. So this tribe, the tribe of Judah, brings 6,800 armed troops to be with him. Of the Simeonites, mighty men of valor for war, 7,100. You notice every time a tribe comes, the author will list what kind of people are being brought to David. So you have shield and spears, the basic infantrymen. You have 7,100 of mighty men of valor. This is kind of like the Marines, you know what I'm saying? This is the Navy SEALs, if you will. Of the Levites, 4,600. The prince Jehoiada of the house of Aaron, with him 3,700. Zadok, a young man, mighty in valor, and 22 commanders from his father's house. Of the Benjamites, the kinsmen of Saul, 3,000, of whom the majority had at that point kept their allegiance to the house of Saul. Of the Ephraimites, 20,800 mighty men of valor, famous men in their father's houses. This is the biggest crew so far. Manasseh brings 20,000 guys. So as you think about which of these tribes you're pumped to see the most, you got 7,000 Navy SEALs, you got 3,000 infantry, you got 20,000 just hardened warriors. So then you have this finally. So Ephraimites, Manasseh brings 18,000. Then verse 32, of Issachar, men who had understanding of the times, to know what Israel ought to do, 200 chiefs and all their kinsmen under their command. It's a very small crew Issachar brings. The descendants of Issachar come to David, only 200 guys strong. That's it. And they come with not sword or shield, not spear or warrior. They bring these wise people of this tribe. I don't know why. Maybe this tribe were a bunch of readers. They were educated. They spent time thinking and learning. It's like a think tank in Israel. It said you had 200 men who understood the times, and they knew what Israel ought to do in those times. This is a very rare gift. David was given these wise people who knew what was happening in the world and knew what Israel should do in the midst of the world they lived in. Issachar gave David the gift of wisdom, the gift of insight. It's a gift many of us need. And in this study, we are attempting to understand our times. Now, unlike the men of Issachar, I do not claim great wisdom. I try to read. I try to have my eyes open and my ears open. I do. We try to be a people as a church that learn, that are easily led by the Lord, quick to admit we're wrong, quick to apologize. We try to be that kind of people. And our attempt to understand the times, we believe America is becoming a post-Christian nation. So what does it mean, a post-Christian nation? Well, I'll give you a picture of what a post-Christian nation looks like. Often Europe is called a post-Christian continent. I've been to Europe. You go to Europe, whether it be, London, whether it be, Italy, wherever you tend to go in Europe. Once upon a time, this was the center of Christianity. I've been in Rome, the eternal city, which was once literally the home base of Christianity. And you go to these churches that were once full of people singing songs of praise to God. And these churches are now empty. They're museums, they're music halls, they're restaurants, they're bars, because no one goes to them. In Europe, you see that the Christian faith is something that maybe your grandparents believed in. But the active participation in weekly worship, in being a part of God's people, is minuscule in a nation, in a continent like Europe. They call that a post-Christian nation. In a place where once Christianity thrived, it is now on the fringes of society. And many people believe that's happening in America, and I agree with them. The data shows us that churches in America are decreasing year over year. That the largest the largest Protestant denomination, they report year over year less baptisms, less people join the church, less attendance. All the numbers that show a church's health are all on the decline. That's on the Protestant denomination. In the mainline denominations, the Methodists, the Nazarenes, their numbers have been going down for decades. And so you see less attendance, less allegiance. You see less people attending faithfully in any kind of way a local committed body of believers. But it's not just a commitment to the church that's waning. We said last week that the committed Christians and the cultural Christians kind of all agreed. And so you have this mainstream cultural consensus going forward that everyone kind of agrees on, what's right, what's true and false. And even if I don't follow it, I still believe the rules for debate are a certain way. We have the same words, the same understanding of reality and truth. Well, what's happening in America, and again, I want to thank once again Ed Stetzer and his fine work, Christians in the Age of Outrage. This is a simple observation he made was just shattering to my mind. That's what's happening in America. One of the ways we can make a post-Christian nation is the cultural Christians in America, the nominal Christians, the Christians in name only, are beginning to align themselves with more of the secular humanist views in American culture. And so all of a sudden, the mainstream cultural consensus, which includes like the cultural Christians and includes the secular humanist kind of part of our society, has now become the mainstream cultural consensus. And the church is slowly being pushed to the outside. Once upon a time, maybe a Buddhist or a Muslim or an atheist would have been on the outside of the American conversation. Well, now what's happening is you're seeing it's not happened, but it is happening, where the influence of Christians in society is lessening. America's moving beyond its Christian heritage. It's slowly forgetting where it came from. Now, what is a post-Christian nation? Is a nation that once was a Christian nation in worldview and ethic, and moves beyond that worldview and beyond that ethic. That happens in two different ways. It happens first, it can be towards secular humanism, a worldview without religion in it. And America has a that's rising in America, that we would say science as religion, you know, that view is gaining a lot of traction and is used as people say, I believe in science. It's used as a trump card. I say trump card, I say it in a Euclid kind of way if you're from Michigan. So it's the right Bauer. It's like, this is my card that wins. So I do my draw 4 is I believe in science. And that simple statement is supposed to be this argument winner, that this is greater than any other argument you can have. And so this is going to win the discussion we're having. So in one hand, you have secular humanism. You have this a-religious worldview that's growing in America. But you also have at the same time happening is you have the remnants of Christianity, the buildings and the crosses and the holidays, but the meanings are being forgotten. A long time ago, Billy Graham, one of the most successful evangelists in American history, preached Jesus and hundreds of thousands confessed Christ's name at these large rallies across America and across the world. And what was crazy about that is when Billy Graham preached Jesus to these massive stadiums full of people, the name of Jesus was not a name that was unheard by people. People maybe they went to church with their grandma, or maybe their aunt was a faithful believer, but they understood there was this thing, God was over there, and I may not be with him, but I knew there was something over there. And I just was estranged from it. And Billy Graham invited people to stop being estranged. Come home. Come to the God you know is there. Met with great success. Great success. But something has happened. And it's not just happened in the white world. It's happening in the black world and the Latino world as well here in America. You have children being born and raised up. And there is no cultural, their view of God, their understanding of Jesus Christ, knowing his word and the stories from that word are not part of their childhood. It's not part of their vocabulary. It's not part of their experience. You have a generation being raised up that don't have that background. If you invite them to come back to where they grew up, Jesus ain't back there. And so here's what we're seeing in a post-Christian nation. Here are the implications of living in a post-Christian nation. Here are the implications of living in a land that is slowly leaving its Christian worldview. Again, I'm not saying this is evil. I'm just saying I am saying it's happening. That America is becoming a post-Christian nation. You see this in church attendance. You see this in people self-identifying. You see this in the vocabulary we use. The church is on the outside of the conversation. It's not having a seat at the table of cultural conversation. You'll see less influence when this happens. The church will have less influence on culture as it's pushed to the outside of culture. It'll have less power and less influence. You also see less success. I mentioned Billy Graham, how he saw great success in how he preached. Now, the American church for the last 50 years has had a come and see a model. We're going to do things well. You come and see. We're going to have great preachers and great music and great kids programs and great midweek stuff for teenagers. If we do this really well, people will come and it'll be a good thing. And what's happening is people don't have any kind of grounding in faith at all. There is no pull or desire or want. Why would I go to church on a Sunday morning? Why would I go? It's a place I've never been and never want to go to. It has no draw or pull. As the churches in America have great communicators and beautiful music and great programming, what we see happening is we're not reaching the people who don't know Jesus with his gospel. We're instead stealing Christians from their churches. Our growth is transfer growth. It's not conversion growth. And I saw a big church here in where I live here in Jersey County. Saw a church go to a new town, started a brand new church, had a young hip pastor, had a great music worship band, and they had a great kids program. They started off like an explosion in that town, and you watched all the people went to little churches who had not so good music and not so great communicators preaching. People just left those little churches and all went to this new, big, cool, hip church. That church went from 0 to like 300 in a year's time. Another church opened 2 years later in the same town using the same model. We're going to go hip and cool and kids programs. And they opened up, and guess what? They didn't go 0 to 300 because there's less to cannibalize. There's less Christians to draw from. Now, instead of come and see, this old strategy of coming and seeing, we're going to have a famous preacher come. We'll we'll send a card to everyone in the stinking town. People will come and hear the gospel. That's becoming less and less effective because less and less people have any desire to be anywhere near things of God. Do you understand? There is no nostalgia. There is no family lineage or loyalty. It's literally just a weird thing that weird people do. So the strategy churches use for 50 years or more are becoming less and less successful as the culture becomes less and less Christian. You understand? There's less influence, there's less success, and there's less acceptance. As Christianity slowly is pushed to the outside of the cultural conversation, inevitably, her views on many things will be not only looked on with disdain, not only called wrong, but seen as an enemy of society at large. Over in Europe, the Church of England recently released a statement on their high view of marriage. That they believe marriage was a thing given by God. It was good that a man and wife married together create a Christian home, and that is a thing to be valued and honored. And they got blown up for saying something the church has believed for more than 2,000 years. They basically said a very basic Christian understanding of the family. They said, we believe that what the Bible teaches is a good thing. Now, I know that many of us don't have that. I was raised in a single mother home my whole life. And the statement the Church of England made was not meant to denigrate single moms or single fathers. It was just saying this is the biblical ethic, the desire, the aspiration that God had put in creation from the beginning. And they were blown apart for just agreeing with a basic Bible truth. So much so, they backpedaled and apologized for agreeing with it. This happens there. It's probably going to happen as time goes forward. Less acceptance of those who believe the Bible teaching is true and authoritative. So, I say all this I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I'm not scared, you understand? I'm saying things are changing. That America is no longer a Christian nation. She is becoming a post-Christian nation. And I used to say pagan nation, and I'm wrong about that. I was wrong when I said that. Christ came to a pagan world. Christ's church, when Paul went into Rome and Ephesus and Corinth, he went into worlds where they didn't know who God was, they didn't know who Christ was. And you go into this world that is spiritual with no knowledge of the one true God. And Paul's able to preach boldly and truly with great success. But Jesus and the disciples are going to a religious world, a Jewish world, where people who think they have no need for the things of God. You're in a world, in the Jewish world, they have all the forms of godliness, but not its power. And it was much harder to reach that world because there was this echo of the truth within society. being in a post-Christian nation is harder than being in a pagan nation because all the symbols are still around and they're either forgotten or looked down on. So America's becoming a post-Christian nation. And again, I'm going quickly through this assertion I'm making. I could write, there are books written on this stuff. I'm just giving us a quick overview so we can be on the same page. Now, here are the questions I have. So the statement we're making is America is becoming a post-Christian nation. And with this, we're going to see in the church less influence, less success, and less acceptance. So here's the question I want to ask you. If this indeed is happening, if America is becoming a post-Christian nation, if the church is being pushed to the outside of influence, outside of the mainstream cultural consensus, if this is happening, here's some questions. One, what is a disadvantage of being on the outside of a culture? It's a question. What is a disadvantage of being on the outside of a thing? I mean, bring it down. If you go to school and you sit alone because you're not allowed to come to the cool kids' table, what is the disadvantage of not having a seat at the table? First question. Talk amongst yourselves. Two, what emotions do you feel hearing these assertions? What emotions are in you as you hear that America is changing? What are the emotions that well up within you? Just be honest. What emotions do you feel? Strong, small, something, nothing? Let's just be honest. What emotions come to the surface hearing this idea, these ideas of America leaving the Judeo-Christian ethic? And the last question, question 3. What should the church do in response to America changing? What should the church do in response to America changing? And this is now the meat of the rest of our studies together. We have set the table. America once was a Christian nation. America's becoming a post-Christian nation. Now, how then shall we live? What does a Christ follower do? What does a Christ follower do? Living in a world that's leaving the things of God. How should a Christian act? What is our strategy as a people, as an individual, as a family? What do you think what do you think the church should do? Now it's being pushed to the outside of the cultural conversation. So these are the questions I want you to think about, talk about, and pray about. We'll be back next week with lesson 3, and we'll begin talking about different strategies, the different responses that Christians are having to the world changing around them. And we're going to examine all the three major responses, and we're going to, of course, chart what we think is the most profitable, the most missional, the most gospel-centered path in response to the changing world around us. May God bless you as you think and as you pray and as you talk amongst yourselves. God bless you.